Based on your comments from the last video, I now have the top 3 reasons why people are still teaching a 10-step closeout, even though 99.9% of athletes don't actually use it in a game. So first you have to understand what I mean by an old school 10-step choppy breakdown. So if he catches the ball and from this position, I'm probably only gonna get 1 or 2 acceleration steps. I know it's acceleration if my foot is striking relatively under the hip. I know I'm starting to put on the brakes when this foot strikes out in front of the hip. That's when we know we're getting braking force sending us this way. So after this initial braking force step, a lot of people are taking 10 choppy steps, right? So it looks like this here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? If you watch any drill on YouTube, any traditional closeout drill, you're gonna see anywhere from 8 to 10 steps. Now, if you watch modern basketball, you never actually see this in a game. Why? Because we all grow up learning this, and then come game time, rules are thrown out, our body self-organizes, and we decelerate like an athlete. So reason number 1 that I gathered from the comments is that it's bad for your knees. People probably say it's bad for your knees because I mentioned braking force. Braking force is not a bad thing as long as we're in good positions to handle those braking forces. So if I were to decelerate in 4 steps, right? If I were to get out here, decelerate in 4, I'm gonna take higher braking force per leg, but that's okay, right? That's what athletes do. If you're gonna play sports, you're gonna experience high braking force. Offensively, we gotta decelerate, that was a 1-2. We would never see an athlete come down full speed and then chop their feet 10 times and take a layup. You would get a hard 1-2 plant and you would get vertical. Even at the youngest levels, we see athletes being able to decelerate in 2 steps, otherwise they're gonna travel. Now, if your legs are weak, you're gonna take more steps to decelerate, and so you might start taking choppier steps, smaller steps, but you're not gonna do this squeaky 10-step deceleration ever. Now, here's where it gets interesting. It's actually worse for your knees to do the 10-step chop. It's less braking force, right? If you did this on a force plate, you would see less force because it's dispersed over a longer period of time, more steps, great. The problem is you're slowing yourself down off frictional forces. So you're relying on that squeak, right? You're relying on friction from the floor to slow you down. What does that cause at the knee? Shearing forces. That causes a lot of shearing on the knee that our knees do not like to handle. You can't actually absorb these forces in the muscles like we should. Our soleus likes to deal with a lot of the forces coming from the floor, our post chain, our quads. These areas are where we should be handling forces. When you're getting into now handling frictional forces, it bypasses all those structures. Uh-oh, patella tendon, you're in trouble. Now, if you're still on the fence, just take a bunch of kids, have them line up and have them race. Do a set of suicides, right? Not one of them at any level is going to come up and take 10 steps and then decelerate. Now, naturally, steps are gonna get shorter, right? That's fine. But we wanna be able to decelerate in 3, 4, 5 steps, not 10 steps. Watch me run to the free throw line, decelerate, and change directions. This is not only the most effective way to slow down, it's also the safest on the knees. So what happened, right? You saw some shorter steps as I approached the line, but you never see that. Look at a receiver, and receivers can get to 100% of their top speed, and you're gonna see them poo, 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 gone. You're never gonna see a receiver at top speed take 10 steps to break down. And they're at 100% speed. Basketball players don't get there in the half-court setting. Even if I have to come across a lane, the ball is skipped, this is as far as I'd be running to close out most likely. I'm only gonna get to about 65, 70% of my max speed. There's no way that I'm getting to 100%. I don't have enough acceleration steps to do it. I showed you guys clips from Coach Tyler's YouTube video where he's preaching the same thing, and he's preaching mostly a 1-2 stop. And I really like that, especially if we have a shooter, right? If we're trying to get a hand up in a shooter's face and we start our breakdown right here, there's no possible way that we're gonna actually get there to get a decent contest. So the best way to contest is just to take up their airspace. Now I can take up their airspace and make them put it on the floor. So especially with a shooter, that's our best option. Now the other good thing is closing out is the hardest skill in basketball. You're always gonna give up something. The hardest skill in basketball defensively is to close out and lock up. If I decide I'm gonna start my breakdown here and chop, they have 100% of their options. If I say, look, I'm gonna take up your airspace, I'm also gonna shade you to a side, because if you were chopping, you can't chop like this, right? You would have to chop and then you would have to jump to a side. if I'm decelling on a 1-2, biomechanically it's the most effective to actually get to a side. So I'm now taking up their airspace and I'm also decelerating in a position where they can only go this way. I just took away 2 of their options. So I now know that their only option is to go this way, or if they're really stubborn, they can try to get over my lead leg, but you're not gonna let that happen. So taking up their airspace and decelerating on the 2-step, that's the best way to run them off the line. Now, what if we're living with the shot and we don't want them to drive? Well, I'm still not gonna go here because it's so slow that they can now catch and come downhill at me. They now have space to come downhill at me. I'm going this way in an unathletic position. He's coming this way in an athletic position. Barbecue chicken, there's nothing I can do. So instead, I'm somewhere in between. I'm not a full 1-2 and I'm not a 10-step. Typically what you're gonna see is a 4-step. For some weaker athletes, you might see a 5-step, but essentially you're getting out as fast as you can and then you start the breakdown, and obviously you would leave them a little bit of space. So if he's out there at the college line, I'm here, right? That was a 4-step chop. It's very safe. My feet are close to the ground. I'm ready to react. I leave him enough space to where I can still contest, but I also have enough space where I'm not gonna get blown by. So if you're all about being safe and not getting blown by, you still wouldn't use a 10-step, you would use more of a 4-step breakdown. And reason number 3 that I heard in the comments was it's not about slowing down. It's not about deceleration. They're throwing that out the window. It's strictly about reaction time. And if you're going with these short, choppy steps, your feet are so low to the ground that if they make a move, I can react. It's just not true. I can do the same thing in a 4-step breakdown. So if I'm here and 1, 2, 3, 4, my feet are still low to the ground, right? We're not saying take full sprinter strides. When somebody goes to slow down, your steps are gonna get shorter. Your feet are gonna be close to the ground and we're ready to react. There's no other situation in any sport where we react the best off choppy feet in a bad biomechanical position. All right, guys, thanks for watching today's video. To conclude, if you're a coach, here's what we teach: an objective. We teach a goal, we don't teach a technique. So when you go into it thinking, well, this is the proper technique, now the athlete is married to that technique and they're not self-organizing and doing what's actually best for them as an athlete. Just set up the player in helps ID and instruct them. Don't let the player catch and shoot, and don't let them burn you. And everything else is gonna take care of itself from there. They're gonna self-organize and figure out what works best for them. Had to study over 200 closeouts to see one 9 or 10-step deceleration. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you guys learned something. Let me know your thoughts below. Peace.